It is now the next day. I need to finish for my dog to stop drinking water. So, it is now the next day. I didn't need to wait this long for the stain to dry, but I did anyways because it was already late into the night, so I didn't want to start filming. So, I am now gonna take back, because the stain is a lot darker than what I would want it to be, I'm gonna go back and sand this back. I usually do this anyways. Even if I had a solid color, I would still go back again. So I'd sand it lightly, very lightly. I would sand back the previous layer of stain and then restain it the same color. I'm gonna do that now, except I am gonna do a lighter color on top. That is a very cool effect that you'll see in the other stain job, but basically if you have a darker color and then go on top of that with a lighter color after sanding, then you'll be able to get the figuring out a little bit better. So all this lovely flaming or quilting, I guess that would be. I'm not quite sure what that pattern would be because it's just in that area. But I would get that figuring out a lot nicer if it's first done in dark. But without further ado, I'm going to go back with 600. I'm going to do it dry. You can go to 320 depending on the sort of effect you want. If you just want to have a very tiny effect, then go back to 320 or 400 or something like that. I'm just going to go 600 because I have a clear idea of what I want to do next. So, as you can see, it's not taking back a lot. So because the front has a bunch of carves and stuff like that, I'm just doing this by hand. Once again, just sand with the grain because you don't want any excess scratches to start showing up, and fold your sandpaper so that it's more of a tool. The really nice thing as well, doing this sanding stage, is that no matter the fact that this was wetted down 2-3 times, the grain is still raising just a little bit in places. So doing this sanding part ensures that you get rid of that and you get a nice, lovely finish. And that's also largely due to the fact that I'm using water-based stains instead of spirit-based. I've yet to try spirit-based. That's why I'm not doing a tutorial on that. Just because I feel it would be kind of silly to do a tutorial on something that I don't know how to use as of yet. As I've understood, it doesn't differ too much from the process, but you know, instead of a tutorial, I feel like that would just be more of a trying out spirit-based stains type thing. And again, during the sanding process, you can kind of start trying to get an even looking surface. So everything's a bit more consistent. Now, the back doesn't have quite as many curves. It's more of a flat surface, so this is going to be easier to do with a block. Also, this sort of thing brings to mind, whenever you do staining and stuff, when you leave it to dry, be careful on what surface you leave it on. I left this rather wet on the tissue paper, so now it has the texture of the tissue paper on it. So I'm going to try and avoid that this time around. You can easily avoid that also by just doing first either side of the guitar and letting it get to touch dry, and then doing the other side. That way you shouldn't be getting this texturing in there. Bear in mind that this is a very, as you can see, a very dirty part of the process. And I am, in this tutorial, I'm staining two different guitars. I have two separate pieces of paper, just so that I don't get any cross-contamination, as it were, of the two different colors, because that would be bad. At this stage, you can also see if there are any spots you have missed, any spots that didn't take. For this one, it's fairly straightforward because of some of the resin having gone this way and that and gotten into the grain. The stain hasn't taken in a couple of places, which, you know, kind of sucks, but once again, fortunately, this is my personal guitar, so the only person who has to live with those sort of discrepancies is me. So, yeah. If this were going out for sale, for a customer, I would have to take back the entire stain and sand it all back and restain it. Alright, there we are. So that's the first layer done and sanded. Now it's time to mix up some new stain. What I previously did was have the red stain and tint that with yellow. What I'm going to do this time around is have the yellow stain and tint that with red, instead of red being tinted with yellow. So first my water. I'm going to have this pretty diluted. There we go. So that's straight up yellow. And I'm not going to use much of the red. I'm literally dropping it in. If you don't have a suitable piece on the guitar to test out what the stain looks like, you can easily just take some tissue paper and dip it in. Now that's still fairly yellow, but seeing as I have a very orange base, I think that should grant me a pretty interesting result. I'm gonna try that on the back of the guitar, just in case. There we go. I'm immediately getting a lot more vibrance. By just adding yellow to the mix. Yeah, I'm not quite sure if this is still the color that I want. It's just, I'm repeating the process over, by the way. Same process as before, making sure that I don't get any drips over. Yeah, I don't think this is quite what I wanted to do, but it's not exactly looking bad either. Now you can see all the dark figuring popping now that I'm putting a lighter color on top, which is a pretty cool effect. The thing is, staining is, unless you have ready mix stain, it's always somewhat of experimentation. I actually rather like that. So now, as I was saying yesterday, to avoid getting streaks and stuff, what I sometimes do is on the second layer, I do a sort of blending. I guess layer, where I start going with the grain, adding a little bit of stain as I go. And this at least I've noticed that this gives me a much more consistent finish all the way through. On this guitar, it is really freaking annoying that all that resin is popping up. But yeah, I tried so long to get all that stuff out. I kept on sanding and sanding and sanding and sanding and sanding. It's just, it had seeped all the way into the grain. So there really wasn't any way around it. Alright, and now that I'm just going to do the round over as well. But now that I have the back nicely stained up, I'm going to let it dry for about 5 minutes until it's pretty much touch dry. And then flip it around and do the front. I realized that I didn't show you guys any of me staining the neck, so I'll do that with this second layer, just so you see what's up. But yeah, the neck is definitely a lot easier to do, because it's literally just going with the grain, working from one side to the other. Fortunately, the color is going to be rather consistent, using the same stain on this guitar, because it's maple and basswood, so both very light colored woods. If I had some darker woods in the mix, I would have to come up with 2 different stains if I wanted the color to be the same, that is. Because of course different woods take the stain in different ways. Seems that there's some super glue from the binding. Well, it happens. But yeah, as you can see, the neck is just a hell of a lot easier. A lot less for you to think about. So if you're trying out staining and whatnot, and you have a good neck to go from, I suggest trying it out on your neck first, just to kind of get the process down. Of course, you can do it on the body. It's completely up to you. Like I said, it's a fairly intuitive process. The more you do it, the more you get used to it. And yeah, that headstock is gorgeous. That's pretty much the color I wanted. But when the lacquer goes on, this thing will pop for damn sure. So I can't wait. Alright, awesome. That's the neck done. Let's have a look at the body. The body is still drying up a little bit, but I think for the most part it's dry enough for me to continue. So here we are. Final layer of stain. Working my way toward the edges. And blending in to the previous pass. Exactly the same process as before. look at that figuring. It's finally coming out. It's really nice. And you can see where the darker stain adds to the effect. Seeps in to all the grain and the figuring and makes it pop. It's pretty awesome. And now that I've used those two words quite a bit in this tutorial, the difference between grain and figuring. So flame, ripples, quilting, stuff like that, that is the figuring on the wood. The grain is what you see going along the wood. So all this dark, these dark lines and dark dots, that's the grain of the wood. There is a difference. So if there's somebody saying they have a nice flame top and they say, look at that grain, what they mean to say is, look at that figuring. Basically, I'm just tracking down all the lines in between passes and blending them in. Much like, you know, if you're drawing with charcoal or something like that and you're rubbing it with your fingers. It's pretty much doing the same thing. One very important thing to remember in between sanding and putting in your next layer is to make sure you don't have any dust anywhere. So clean your surface up, because that dust can get trapped in between your stain layers and make it look dull and not have the pigment sink in like you want it to. End grain, again, sucking up the stain quite a bit. But hey, there we are. Just doing the cutaways a bit more, because it's end grain and it's really seeping through. Now, while everything's still wet, you can kind of blend and blend and blend up until you're satisfied with the end result. I try very hard not to do any sort of like smearing sort of motions, because that just doesn't give you a consistent finish. You can use it as a technique to achieve a certain type of effect, but if you just want a nice consistent color all the way through, that's definitely not what to do. But hey, that is the orange 8th string now done. Time to move on to the next one.